I now have a huge privilege of running a panel discussion, and I just want to take a few seconds just to introduce our speakers before we get the panel discussion started. And really importantly, this panel discussion depends on your questions. Please don't make me ask all of them. So back up on the app, find the panel session that we're in, and then you can ask questions up there. So my speakers today, we're welcoming back both of our speakers, so Mina and Fae, my co-chair, Nadera. I also get to welcome Aleksa Matić, who is from Bosnia-Herzegovina, and I'm really hoping he's going to give us some of his thoughts about youth mental health in his own home country. I also get to welcome up Srividya Iyer, who is from Canada, but she's really interested as well in mental health in India. So hopefully she can talk a little bit about that, and I know she's interested in peer support programs, which I'm very passionate about myself. And we also get to welcome up Steve from Foundry, who has told me he's particularly interested in how we engage young homeless people, marginalised communities, and the indigenous communities. So I hope that gives you lots of thoughts for important questions to be asking this panel. I'd like to get us started, listening to all of your fantastic voices, by just getting a thought from you about what you think we need to be doing in your home countries or in your home environments to really make sure we're including all voices. And Aleksa, would you be happy getting us started?
Tap, it's working. Sorry. First of all, I must apologize myself in advance because I'm not a native English speaker, so maybe I'll have some problem during this conversation, but I will hope it's going to be okay. Yesterday in the tabletop room, one of the speakers was Lawrence Howell, I think, sorry if I'm mistaken. He was speaking about the right approach. And during his talk, he reminded me about something from my hometown 2 years ago. In fact, I'm feeling very, very bad because of it. It was about the major groups. I was working in one high school. I was trying to speak with a group of students, and I asked them, "What is your first association when you heard the word gender?" And they will say homosexual, transsexual. What is the first association when it comes to the race? They would say Asian, black. When everything you ask them, nobody wanted to speak from their own group, you know. And I think that was the problem. And more I was asking them, no one was mentioning his own group. So I remind that because when we talk about mental health, first association as well was, what is mental health for you? And they said, when someone is mad, you know. They were probably thinking about mental illnesses. And that is okay to talk about that way, but first facts we must face with that their mental health is an issue, not illness, and you can talk about that. I'm having very hard time in my country because I'm coming from post-socialist country. We were in the socialist regime for 50 years, and if you try to talk about something about mental health, about anything, nobody wants to talk about that. So we're having really, really hard time. And I think the main thing for my country, and maybe for other ones, the best approach to see the mental health like a normal issue. Every of us have anxiety. I mean, before this speech, I had anxiety when I was sitting there, you know, and everyone had depression from time to time, and it's okay. And we must face that fact. And we're having really hard time to dealing with that. I mean, sometimes you speak to someone, it's okay, but the parents came, and what you're speaking about to my children, you're going to make him mad. I'm not, and we're just trying to help him, you know. Thank you.
Nadera?
Yeah, so for me, it stems from my personal experience. So for me, what inclusion will look like is that we don't actually put people in boxes and actually understand that everyone who has a mental health issue, their experiences are very unique. So in my case, one of the challenges I had is that even though I had a mental illness, I was actually high functioning. I was able to go to school, I was getting good grades, and because of that, I didn't get the help that I needed from the system because I wasn't sick enough. So this idea that you need to be sick enough to get the help you need, I think it just goes against all our efforts to try to generate awareness and early intervention, because the idea of early intervention is that you don't want the symptoms to get worse. But what happened to me is that because I wasn't seen as sick enough, I drove myself to be sick enough in order to get the help I need, which I think I don't ever want to see another young person do that, which really is why I'm doing advocacy today, to really raise awareness about this idea that do not turn away people who may seem to be really functioning on the outside, but they're really suffering on the inside, and you don't give them the help they need in time, they're going to go down the road as expected, as what community wants them to see, you know, that really people with mental health issues can't get out of bed, can't function, but actually the majority of us are, with the right help, we can do well. And I think me sitting here, it's my first international conference, my first time speaking to such a crowd, and the fact that I'm sitting here is evidence that it can happen. Yeah.
I think you all before me have spoken so eloquently to what inclusion means, and I want to echo my agreement to that. The couple of things that perhaps I would like to add to that is that inclusion not only means sort of sensitivity or acceptance, but also true celebration and appreciation of context and of individual and family level differences and strengths. The other thing, just sort of following up on what you had to say, you know, we are here in the context of talking about transformations in youth mental health services, and in that context, I think inclusion also means making sure that truly the doors are open of all these sort of services to youth presenting with all types and of concerns from mild to serious, making sure that, you know, the chance at a fulfilling life and citizenship is available to all, including people with serious mental health problems. I work a lot with young people with psychosis, and I want to make sure that the kinds of things we're talking about are accessible to all. Thank you.
I'd love to hear from Steve too, but can I just remind you all, please send those questions in.
You know, I think I have to say this is an incredibly humbling experience to be up here with such amazing and inspirational speakers. And, you know, I think it's really important for someone like me to recognize the power and gap and difference that exists when I'm in the room with any young person, but especially when I have a young person who is an immigrant or an indigenous young person. I'm a white male, highly privileged, from one of the most privileged countries, one of the most privileged communities in the world, Vancouver. And it took a long time for me to understand that when I was sitting in the room with a young person, there was an incredible power imbalance. And I think sometimes we forget that. And what has really helped me, I think, is to try to bring, and I think it's naive, and sometimes it's described as naive, but the reason I started this work to begin with was because I wanted to help people. And I think when you bring that back in the room and you try to strip away all the diagnostic issues and all the labels, and you just try to connect as people, then in many ways, I think you become more inclusive, because it encourages you to be curious, to try to understand what your points of commonality are. What books do you like? What movies do you like? What did you do last week? Where did you go for a walk? And I think if we can do that, and we can remember that we are human beings trying to connect, then we become more inclusive, because I don't know what it's like to be living with a lot of the things that folks are living with, because I come from such a privileged background. But I do want to help. And I think that's often the thing that I think that I have to remind myself when I walk in the room, that I'm trying to connect. And once I can connect, then a lot of other things can happen. So with my team, what I say is, when you're in the room with a young person, try to connect with them, try to understand them, and don't start from a place of, sorry, I don't think I can help you, or we don't do that here. Start with, we will find a solution. We will find a way. I might not be the expert in this area, but I will help you find the person to talk to. And I think that that's a commitment that we make in our service.
We had a fantastic question up here that really resonated with some of my thoughts yesterday, where we were listening in the future retrospective last night, and I was wondering, how do I make all of my local efforts expand beyond what I can do locally? And this question, I think, really echoes that, of how do you think we all take the small efforts we can make locally and expand them to reach a global community? How do we bridge the gap between us and the rest of the world? Mina?
Is this okay to say?
Yeah.
Well, I'm just a boring researcher, so I do think that actually, if we gather a bit of data to show that it is actually, there's something called face validity, where actually it looks like it makes sense. Doing this, working in this way makes sense, but actually we need a little bit of data to support this. So in the refugee world, I did a big kind of global review of all the different things that are being done in schools to help the mental health of refugee children. And you name it, it's been tried. Like every single type of art, drama, problem solving, whatever, it's all been tried, but absolutely none of it has any data to let us know which of these things might be best. So I think we all need to do what we're doing, but to just put a little bit of effort and resource, even if it's a simple evaluation, to just try and understand either what the users feel or how they find it, and also just to take some measurements. And then, in a way, we can help our global colleagues with the armor that they need, which is a little bit of data to convince people to put a bit of money to help them support what they do. So that's the boring science response. But one other thought is actually we're also at a new age of social media where actually young people are able to learn about things that sound good and share it in a way that we've never been able to do before. So also, I suppose, not to underestimate the value of that voice as well.
Go for it, Faye.
And I think I would agree with that entirely. I also think, again, spaces like this are a really clear demonstration of how we share practices from different parts of the world. And I think the better that we can be at engaging more spheres that might not always be included in these kinds of spaces, the better we will be at sharing those practices. And I also think that a lot of communities that aren't, if we're talking about inclusion, a lot of communities that aren't included in traditional child and youth mental health services have incredible programs that are created by their organizations and by their communities. And so I think if organizations that work with those communities, or the organizations that have more capacity in evaluation and research, can recreate those relationships and start doing that evaluation. Because I know of so many brilliant programs for queer and trans young people that nobody's researching and that nobody's evaluating, and we can't share that model. We can't share those best practices or develop best practices if we don't bring them out and research them and then share them in spaces like these.
Fantastic. Before we move on, can I ask you, Aleksa, whether you've got any thoughts on that? Perhaps maybe not a research answer?
Yeah, I'm peer educator, I'm 21-year-old, so I cannot give you the research answer, but what I'm thinking right now, there are different things from different cultures, from different religions, and we're not all the same. In some fact, there is a cultural influence and everything. But it's my opinion, maybe I'm wrong, but every person deserves to feel safe. When you think local and trying to something on the global level, in every culture, just try to find a space for the people. We can all be different by look, by thinking, but we are community. We live on this planet. So I will probably, what is interesting for you because since I'm the only one from the Eastern Europe, the LGBT community is not accepted in my country, and you cannot say that you are LGBT, member of LGBT community. You cannot say that. You can have really bad problems. And there was one quest. The guys there was a social experiment. There was a social experiment, and the guys on the street were asked, "What would you do if you know that your first neighbor is heterosexual?" And they said, "I would kill him. He deserved to die." They don't know the difference, and that is the problem. We are facing. Just imagine that. it was same as me. I was in one school, and the parents came here and they attacked me. What are you trying to say to our children? I'm trying to say, I mean, there are some things that are bad, that are from the past, from past regime. I mean, what is bad in such a way for to be open-minded? Is it bad? I don't think it's bad, and I had a hard time in my community. So I wanted just to say this to all of you guys. Thank you.
We had a lovely question up here that I'm aware we've got about a few minutes, so a very quick answer from people, but around how can new organizations and services ensure that individuals identifying as part of a minority group feel comfortable and safe? Nadera, do you have any thoughts?
Well, for me, just a very simple and quick answer, because like I mentioned, I went knocking on many, many doors before I finally found the right door that would actually see me. And it was just a simple thing that they said after I shared my issues, and just one very simple sentence just said, I would like to hear more about your story. Just like that, and I broke down crying because no one ever said that in that sense. Most of the time after I explained my story, and then they'll ask me, oh, but how are you doing in school? And I'll say, yeah, I'm doing fine, I'm getting good grades. And then just like that, the conversation ends, and they'll be like, oh, you just need to exercise, you just need to eat, right? Yeah, like, I don't know that, right? Yeah, so just that one sentence that my therapist said to me, I want to hear more. It just made me cry because, yeah, just like that, that is for me. Yeah.
You know, because we're in the process of just setting up new organization after new organization in terms of partnerships, and I think that the answer to that question really resides at several levels, but I'll address two. One is that at a leadership level, you want to really make sure that you're including representation, the perspective of that community, and when working with indigenous communities, trying to include elders and making sure that elders have input. It's incredibly valuable. But then I think at the youth level, making sure you have youth advisory groups, whatever you want to call it, but a youth advisory group that has representation from those populations as well. So you are getting their input and feedback on a regular basis. And if possible, finding a way to be invited into the community and then inviting that community to your space as well and making sure that they're part of that partnership.
Vijay?
Sure, I just wanted to add that perhaps, you know, we can never, and the only thing we can do is adopt a stance of humility with openness and know that we don't know and know that we can be guided by people and express that openness and genuinely. But I do think that, you know, sometimes when I was in grad school, I had a huge problem with this idea of like multicultural competence, as if it's something you can become competent in. I really think that at best we can adopt a stance of humility with genuine openness and compassion.
Thank you. And Fae, you've got some closing thoughts for us.
Agreed, entirely. That was more or less what I was hoping to say. But I also think, again, like setting the standard, right? Like I think that too often we think about inclusion as something that's off the sides of our desks, and we don't think about it as something that has to be embedded in the core of how our organizations work. And I also think that building those local relationships, I'm involved with a trans health project in Ottawa right now, and we're working with mainstream service providers, and the only way that we're able to work and move forward with them is by building the relationships with the local organizations and groups. When you build those relationships, their workers, their service providers, and the people who are connected to their service speak to one another. You need to build the idea that you are honest and doing your best to work from that humility-based lens with those communities, and you need to demonstrate it and set the standard.
Thank you. I think we're out of time. I feel utterly humbled by everything I've heard this morning and so inspired to keep working on these issues and keep listening. Can I ask everyone for a huge round of applause for our amazing panel?